Welcome back to another episode of Trident Talks. My name is Gareth Davies, and I help cyber vendors build their go-to-market teams. And today I'm joined by a friend of the business and a friend of mine, Max Corbridge, CEO and founder of Secure Agentics. Max, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me on, Gareth. Nice to be back. My name's Max. I've been working in offensive cybersecurity for the best part of a decade now. Ethical hacking, penetration testing, and then red teaming. And then it was probably 3 or 4 months ago now, took a step away from that, did some contracting, and then really been focusing on starting up my own thing in the product space, which is where we are now with Secure Agentics. And we're focused almost exclusively on the cybersecurity aspects of agentic AI as a real subset and a real sort of meaty problem.
Okay, yeah, cool. And I suppose, did you create this company based off a pain point that you'd felt, or because you saw a space that was ripe for disruption?
So no, it wasn't a pain point that I felt when I first decided to go down the route of agentic AI specifically. It was actually just because it was such a challenging thing that we were trying to do. I mean, you think how long it took for us to put a self-driving car on the road, and even now in like San Francisco, they're still. I mean, I've not been, but I'm aware they're definitely more advanced than they once were, but they're still not at the point where we're able to do it, entirely safely or roll it out wide scale. And yet we were starting to go down the path of saying with AI, well, let's let it do everything, not just drive a car. Let's let it do, a bit of everything. And from a cybersecurity background, I saw that journey that we were going down really in the very early days of when AI agents were a thing, and started thinking, this is a real big problem. This is a problem which is going to need a lot of security-minded people working on it. And I want to be at the forefront of that, helping to find out the right way of doing AI, and specifically giving autonomy to AI is, I think, the real key bit.
Okay, and obviously your career spans from mainly like pen testing, then you went into offensive security and red teaming. How much of an impact has that background had on what you're trying to do at Secure Agentics?
I mean, it's everything. So we're sort of coming out of stealth. We're sort of in stealth. So I won't say too much exactly about what we're building under the hood, but I can say at the higher level that it's kind of in the world of detection and response for AI agents. And when you are thinking about that, my background in red teaming, where I spent most of the last couple of years trying to avoid being caught by things like endpoint detection and response, that was really the sort of fuel for the fire that allowed me to understand how detection and response works under the hood, how these systems actually intimately do what they do, and then how we can, from my side it was more bypass them, but actually it was also a case of how do you build something which is going to detect what an AI agent is doing. And the other thing, I think the most useful skill, is that when you're doing red teaming, you're working in production environments. You've got the keys to the kingdom most of the time. And if you take the wrong action in a critical environment in production and accidentally knock something over, then that could be huge impact for both you and for the client. And so you have to get very, very good at managing the risk of your actions in these environments. And that is what we're now trying to build as an overlay over AI agents. How do you allow production technologies and enterprise technologies to talk to each other and give autonomy to each other without introducing risk? And that was something which I honed over the years of red teaming.
Okay, cool. So I suppose at a super high level then, or maybe in simple terms, what you guys are doing are threat detection for AI agents and offering that kind of guardrail. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, making sure that the AI agents that we're using are not misbehaving, because they've been very naughty recently, to put it very plainly. Attackers are starting to use them for all sorts of things, as well as them themselves just going rogue. I mean, they're still an untrusted technology that we don't really know how to build securely or properly yet. So sometimes they're being attacked, but also sometimes you put them in novel operating conditions and they just do things we didn't expect, and you're causing impact that way. So we're very much at that frontier of what are your AI agents doing? Are they doing what you want them to be doing? And then are you stopping them from doing the things that you don't want? But there's a few ways that we're doing that a little bit more uniquely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. I actually spoke to Itzik Alves, who is the CEO of Entra Security. He was my
Hmm.
last episode that I did, and he was within a CISO position at Microsoft when he was at Israel, and he said that he was breached 3 times whilst he was in that position, and all of them were through like NHIs and AI agents and kind of the bot space. So he obviously felt that pain and created what is now Entra Security, but it's definitely an area within a business that seems a lot more vulnerable because it's such a ripe space. It's an innovating space moving forward, right? So it's definitely a space that needs a security tooling to kind of advance. Do you think that AI security will have its own tech stack like cloud security, for example?
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, I think the fact that what we're building is sort of like the fabric for that, but also the fact that so I'm in that stage right now where we're speaking to investors, speaking to customers, building out the product, and it's really the time that I'm now spending is really fine tuning the idea that we had, several months ago, and that's where it's been really interesting saying what people are actually needing. And I was literally having a conversation just before this. In fact, that's why we were a bit late to start this, among many other reasons. And the conversation was with the security team at a hedge fund, and they were just saying like, we need some way of managing this. Like we've if you think about all of the other areas of security, you think at like the endpoint, right? Or email. Email is a good example. When email first came out to now, the level of email controls that we have and security controls we have around our email inbox with, blocking spam that doesn't get in, blocking phishing emails that don't get in, allowing you to take out emails that don't fit a certain, pattern or security boundary that you expect, all the records used to authenticate who you are. The fact that if you click a link, people can go and then see what link you've clicked. There's all of this infrastructure which has been built around email because it's such a treasure trove for attackers, and yet this new technology comes along, AI. I am 100% sure that we will have an entirely new security control and attack surface that builds and fits around that. And my conversation with clients is already sort of calling that out, that they're saying like, we've got this thing and it's really risky and we don't have the tools that we need to be able to monitor it or to control it in the way that we want.
Okay, yeah, fine. We've seen huge acquisitions, right, in the space. If you look at AIM Security, Lakera, Splix AI, all have kind of recently been acquired, right? And they were very early in their journey. So what's kind of your key differentiator at Secure Agentics versus maybe like the likes of the AIMs, Lakera, or the wider AI security space?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. Firstly, it's interesting that you say that they are early because they are, or they were. What I find really interesting is this conversation right now, or like, are we early or are we late? Because you look at it one way and you're like, okay, if you are the hidden layers of the world and you've been doing this for several years prior and you're fundraising, 4 years ago, I think it was, or 5 even, then yes, you're very early to that problem. But also the actual problem hadn't really manifested itself like it has today. Even now, most enterprises are not adopting AI at the pace that we expect. And you speak to a lot of founders and a lot of startups in this space. The enterprise buy-in is for AI security is slower. I work with banks that have a blanket ban on all AI, full stop, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And then you're trying to pitch to these banks and say, okay, we built this really advanced system, and there's somewhat in the middle of like, I think we're actually just getting started with AI and the AI journey, and actually in some ways the timing is right now to be at the point where when we're really ramping up the adoption. So I think from that side, I think the timing is actually playing into our favor, weirdly, although you've already seen acquisitions in the space. I think as well that one of the other things that we're doing differently is that we are going down the open source route. Now, no one's really gone down the open source route in this space so far. I won't say too much more because I want to keep it that way. But the idea is that by giving something away to the wider community, the community which I've come from, and really allowing people to see the benefit and the value of what we bring and solving their problems through something like this, that's an angle which we're not really seeing many people have taken so far. But my view is that is the the angle that makes sense for the current market.
Okay, fine. You mentioned then that like banking, for example, haven't adopted AI and they haven't been aggressive with onboarding that kind of tech. So have you seen industries in particular that have deployed them very aggressively? And if so, what industries do you think, or give me an idea of what your ideal customer profile would look like for Secure Agentics?
Yeah, so I will caveat or push back on the fact that banks aren't adopting it. There are huge variety. You'll have some banks, like for example, one of the first uses of AI agents in production was from JP Morgan, right? So they were sort of the pioneers, and then you've also got people on the other side who will be much slower to move, and that's the same for any two businesses within any one industry, right? There's many ways that it could look. However, interestingly, the people who are most interested in what we're building and who it's almost like, how you feel, it's like I was watching this video, I can't remember where it was, but they were talking about product market fit. How do you know when you found product market fit, which we're building, right? So we're way before that. But the idea is that the market will tell you, you feel a pull from the market. That's when you know you've hit product market fit. And without really intending to, when we started this journey, and I was speaking at several industry events and speaking to people that I know and whatnot, there was quite a clear pull from hedge funds. Hedge funds, from my interactions with them over the last couple of months now, are much further ahead than the majority of the industry with regards to how they're using AI and the scale at which they're using AI. There are some hedge funds I speak to who I would say are comfortably months, probably years ahead of the industry. And that's saying quite a lot in the AI space where everything moves so fast. So that is who we're working with from early on. That's who we are finding our problem that we're trying to solve is resonating with greatest. And so really that's the sort of market that we're going down at this stage. Ultimately, though, that could end up expanding into the wider sort of financial sector, generally speaking, who are, pro AI, and some of the more early adopters as well within fintech, for example. But for now, I think it's good to start niche and to start smaller. And so right now we're speaking to mostly London-based hedge funds, actually, as a pretty smaller market.
Yeah, okay, fine. So as companies that start to integrate agents into workflows, what are where are the biggest security blind spots appearing?
So right now, the biggest problem that we have is that there are several systemic flaws with AI, which we need to just accept. Things like prompt injection. Prompt injection has been around since the dawn of AI. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. That's because AI is built on natural language processing. It basically doesn't know the difference between instructions and speech. And so if you give it instructions, it will just do it sometimes. Now that's a problem which is not going to go away, right? So there's a systemic problem with AI, generally speaking, which when we were in the era of chatbots, is fine, because if you get something wrong, you were the one that had to coerce the actual chatbot to say something, and maybe it did, maybe it didn't. The impact of that is almost none. Versus where we are now, where we're graduating from chatbots to agents, and what we're doing is we're connecting them to ever more systems. And I'm actually writing my weekly newsletter update on this as we speak, on this topic of the fact that we are now connecting our agents to MCP servers, to external data sources, to, we're building them with third-party libraries. Essentially, what we're doing is, because we want to get the most out of AI, we are now allowing AI to talk to itself and talk to other AI systems and talk to more distributed systems, which is great. That's what we need for this big future vision that we have of AI solving all of our problems. For that, it needs to be able to communicate with external systems, external databases, whatever it is. However, by doing that, and by doing that when we have a systemic flaw, which is relatively easy to exploit, what we're doing is we're introducing a whole load of new risk avenues into the use case of AI. And to come back to that example of email security, if you were to give email the ability to take actions, right, on your behalf, that would be quite a big thing to do. And we don't even have that ability. All we have the ability to do in email is just click on a link most of the time, is what the malicious trigger will be. And yet we've got all of these security controls around email. Yet now we're doing the same with AI, but we're giving it the ability to do things on our behalf. And we don't have any of the security controls which exist around this right now. So the problem statement is pretty strong for how we're using AI right now.
Okay, do you think most businesses are actually aware of what they're introducing when they give an agent access to their systems and data?
I think they do understand what they're doing, from the sense that they have to connect it most of the time, so they know that. But I don't think they know how easily compromised the models which underlie or underpin your AI systems are. Prompt injection is just one of them. You mentioned data poisoning as well. That's a whole new era of potential bugs and things down the line. So I would say they do understand what they're doing, but they maybe don't appreciate the gravitas of what they're doing, or just how risky it is given the current state of AI and its maturity.
Okay, fine. I know you mentioned MCP, right? So what role do you think a standard like MCP will play in defining security across the agent ecosystem?
So I think the fact is that we actually kind of missed a trick with MCP. MCP was designed to allow agents to connect to tools, and that's great. As ever, the first version of MCP was all about, and in fact, I just wrote a newsletter on this as well. The first version was all about how do you connect an agent to a tool and standardizing that, and that's brilliant. The most important thing was clearly getting it to work. What they didn't do at the time that they were writing it was do even basic security, baked into that. So the ability to prove who you are, for example, is pretty common in basically every other protocol. You have to prove who you are before you can talk to someone, so that you can use authentication, authorization, security, all those sorts of things. That didn't exist in the first version of MCP. And so what we found is that MCP was released as this sort of project and then quite quickly became the universal standard, and yet it's still lacking huge amounts of basic security controls. So I think from that side, people like the versions of MCP are getting better in terms of what MCP security they bake in. But the other and sort of wider problem that we're having is kind of going back to what I said before, is that AI is now being interconnected more with MCP, which is great because this is what we need to do. But every time you connect it to a new MCP system, you introduce several risks. So through that MCP system could come your prompt injection attack. Through that MCP system could come your data poisoning attack. Through that MCP system, one thing that we've seen recently is that you will have I can't remember I think it was an email MCP server. I can't remember exactly which one it was. Yeah, it was an email one. And what they did is they had several days of it running as a genuine email service, where it was sending and receiving all the responses. And then after a few days, they changed the back end of the MCP server, which you can't really control or see. And what it did is every time it sent an email, it would then also blind copy in an external address, which was then essentially just reading every email that was passing through that MCP server. So you have different risks, but all of them, are going to get worse when you interconnect more with things like MCP.
Talk to me about maybe a recent vulnerability that was exploited in the industry, or maybe something that you've seen or tested that illustrates how quickly things can go wrong without proper guardrails on agents.
So I'll say one which I think is actually a real near miss. It's the Amazon Q breach that was, I think, earlier in the summer, or late summer. And it was essentially, what happened is an attacker pushed a malicious update to the Amazon Q. Amazon Q is a coding assistant, kind of like Codex or Claude Code or other ones that you may have used. And the attacker pushed this update, which basically instructed all of the agents that were running Amazon Q to try and wipe the machine that they were running on, and delete the entire thing. So imagine you've downloaded Amazon Q, you're using it to do a pet project at home, or I know people who use it at length in the enterprise environment, And they now also, they push an update, which then says your Amazon Q agent that's trying to help you has now been told to basically destroy your computer that it's running on. Now, this was a legitimate update that was pushed. I mean, it wasn't legitimate. It was a malicious update that was accepted. It was pushed out to all Amazon Q customers. So we were a near miss away from it being terrible, because what actually happened was the update which they sent was malformed. For lack of a better word, it essentially just didn't run properly. And so this instruction, which tells you your agent to wipe everything, was actually ignored, and didn't happen. Didn't cause the impact that it could have done. But that could have been hundreds of thousands of laptops all destroyed overnight. And in fact, we almost were. The attack was successful, but the attack payload was wrong. So I would say that's one where you're like, something like that. And I will say, while we're talking about it, because I've talked about it a couple of times, and I want it to be on record in several places for when it eventually does happen, is that we are headed towards a big AI wake up moment breach, like your sort of WannaCry or your Snowflake for identity, whatever it may be, where suddenly everyone realizes, oh, like this is actually, we've given a bit too much trust to the system, or this system is actually quite vulnerable. Those in the security space know that, and they see what we're doing with the rapid adoption of AI and just throwing more at it and more at it and more at it. And there will be a time in the not so distant future where suddenly everything sort of comes as a bit of a wake up call, and everyone goes, oh, and it will be a big breach. And when it does happen, I think people will start to wake up a lot more to what the actual risks that are inherent to using this technology at the scale and the pace that we're using it.
Okay, yeah, fine. Just highlighting the scale and the pace that we're using this, and how fast things are moving in the industry. Like, there's new frameworks, new protocols, new capabilities every week, right? So
yeah,
how do you see AI security evolving in the next 2 to 3 years? And I suppose, what role will Secure Agentics have in that future?
Yeah. So I want Secure Agentics, and the mission for Secure Agentics will always be to show the industry and help people do AI the right way, and specifically autonomous AI the right way, which is a way which has some semblance of security baked into it, which right now we're not even at that stage. We're not at the stage where we even know how to do AI, AI security, 100 out of 100. We're just trying to get people to start thinking about security for AI. So I think there's a long journey, and I'm very much going to be a part of that journey of pushing AI security. I think there's 101 people talking about all the positive side of things, of AI, and all the benefits and all the productivity gains, which is true. I think we need a lot more people, and Secure Agentics will play its part in that, in pushing the security side and saying, how, are we doing this the right way? People are coming at it from different angles. So like the AI Security Institute, for example, is much more around the general model risk, and I think they're doing a great job in that space. I think we need people in the enterprise as well, and that's where we are focused on how to do this the right way. I think, coming back to that, where does the AI security market or industry go? Honestly, it's really hard to tell. I think that we're going to see a good few more years with regards to the agent side of things, and the agents being the sort of talk of the town. I think with regards to even if we didn't evolve AI any further, and we just used what we already have with AI agents, the technology, but we just got better at using them, I think there's several years worth of like additional discovery and improvements that we can do within that. At the same time, we're going to have more people putting more, powerful agents, building more powerful agents, more ways of connecting them. So I see that changing, and I see that the longevity of AI agents for at least a good number of years, I see them getting a lot more interconnected, a lot more autonomous, and they creeping into a lot more of our sort of daily lives. And then I think after that, who knows? Really, that's like I think, then comes the question of like, are we then at artificial general intelligence? Are we then at artificial super intelligence? I'm very interested in keeping up to date with what's happening with those, and as soon as we do, I'm sure that's kind of unlocking a whole new world of security challenges. Yeah. Where you've got super intelligent AI systems, So yeah, I think for now it's going to continue to be the agentic side and a lot of the risks that we've got, but ultimately we're going to see that evolve, and I'm very excited for that. And our role is very much to help promote the right way of doing things.
Yeah, it was actually going to be my next question. Obviously, we've seen some new things within the industry, from mobile apps through to cloud, and now we're in the AI era, right? My next question was actually going to be like, what's next after after this bubble goes and
Yeah, I mean, I saw someone who was that I was at Slush, the startup event last week, and I was watching a talk. I can't remember who it was now off the top of my head, but they were saying how, when is the AI bubble going to burst? And I don't think the idea, my view on it is, I don't really think that the AI bubble is going to burst as such. I think maybe the fundraising and the investment and the hype side of things, but I don't think we're going to see a U-turn on the use of AI. I think that's here to stay. And I think that what will happen is, like when we first had, mobile came out, and suddenly everyone was talking about mobile. Oh, no, it wasn't. It wasn't at Slush. It was a video from Sam Altman. I remember. And he was saying the same thing, that like when mobile came out, everyone was talking about mobile, and mobile didn't go away. Mobile is still the most used and most dominant platform for apps, and you're not a mobile developer, you're just a developer, and that's expected that you do it mobile. I think the same thing will happen with AI, where it becomes sort of part of the furniture. I don't think that means it's going to be any less big or impactful. I just think it might have less hype around it. Now, what comes next? I think that's where the top side of AI has a lot more of a top side than a lot of other technologies. So yes, the internet was brilliant, and the internet allowed us to connect from all over the world, and it opened up a whole new world of opportunities and businesses and ideas and ways of working and everything. And it's had an irreversible change in our lives. I think the similar long-term impact is possible within AI with regards to the ability for it to take on certain tasks, to automate and to supercharge our ability to do certain tasks. I think that will have long-term systemic changes to how we work. And I think that there's probably a lot more to give from that side before the quote unquote bubble bursts, similarly to how the internet is still giving to this day and still leaving its repercussions.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Just to kind of bring it back to kind of what you're doing then, what's it been like building in such a fast-moving market?
Yeah, I mean, it's my first time building anything, so this is now my new normal. But yeah, I mean, like 6 months time, everything looks different. I speak to people who are raising in different scenarios, different environments, and it's just very, very like you just have things move so quick. By the time you start building something, it's changed again. You need to be moving at breakneck pace, but then you want to be doing things right and securely. So it's really, really, it's tricky. It's definitely going to keep you on your toes, but that's why it's quite exciting for me, because not my full time, but like I have been living and breathing AI security for like a year straight now. And so like very little happens that I'm not on top of or aware of. So I'm sort of used to that pace. And what's good is like helping to feed that back into what we're doing at Secure Agentics. If you don't have someone who is super plugged in to what's going on in the AI space, I don't know how you would keep up, because it's like you need to be obsessed with it. It's almost a full-time job just staying on top of what's actually happening around you, let alone changing, updating and going back. And even that, you're never going to catch everything. So yeah, I think you definitely need to move quick, but you also need to be super eyes up about what's happening. Because, for example, right, there's like a perfect example of this was we started going down the path of, I won't say too much, but we started going down the path of making something, and then, which is a part of what we're doing. And then all of a sudden, this provider made one that was free for everyone to use and was better than what we were going to build. And I was like, pause, we've got this, bring that in, use that instead. So like staying on top of what's going on around you can also mean you're moving at the same pace, because you're using all the same shortcuts that people are, or not shortcuts, but the same sort of efficiency gains. But if, it could have taken us 6 months to build that thing, and we would have built it and it would have been half as good as what we got for free from this. So yeah, it's pretty mental environment, to be honest.
I was going to ask that. Do you get an idea and then you think, right, we have to carry this idea through, or do you let like news from inside the industry dictate where you take like your journey or the product. But I suppose you've just mentioned that, right? Like it's because everything is so fast moving. Like the idea that you may have, or the idea that you have, someone might have had that already 4 or 5 months ago, and they're almost at the point where they're ready to launch production, right? So I suppose you have to stay on your toes and maybe not be stubborn in the fact that, like, oh, I'm going to build something better, maybe, and you have to be, well, actually, yeah, this is already unbelievable. Let's move on to our next idea.
So yeah, I think just the first thing on that, absolutely. If you refuse to adapt, then you will not do well. You will just sink in this environment, because by the time you actually release something, it will be slow. But what actually I would push back on is that you need to look at what other people are doing and be like, oh, I can't do that anymore. I think there's a real value in navigating where people are at and where people are not. And also listening to what the market and the environment is currently doing and being ready to adapt and to chop and to change. So like what we're building right now has a core base, right, which is not going to change. It's the mission statement. It's the core technology, which is actually allowing us to do the main bit of what we're about to do. But the thing which is changing constantly is how do we integrate and what do we integrate with, right? So when we first started launching this, there was a different version to what there was 6 weeks ago to now, and that side of things is where it's really you need to be moving really, really quick. I mean, I think you can't be doing a full U-turn on what you're building every couple of days, but ultimately I think keeping your eyes open to how people are going to consume your product, because that is changing very, very quickly in the AI era, and being able to sort of adapt to it at that stage.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. What, apart from just maybe like how important it is to stay on top of the market and the industry and how quick things are moving, give me another key learning that you've found as a founder, because this is your first time doing this, right? It's your first time building. Maybe give me a lesson that you've learned. Maybe you would have liked to applied it back to when you first started. I don't know. Give me some words of wisdom about your time as a founder so far.
I'll tell you one which is completely unrelated to cyber AI or anything like that. So I just got back from Slush, as I mentioned, an event, and I was asked to go there by a VC and to like kind of meet them in person. And the problem was that Slush, if you're not familiar, there's 3,500 investors, 7,000 roughly founders. It's busy. It's really busy. So like, yes, there's loads of people there, like investors there, but also, yes, there's a ton of founders there. And what I didn't realize when I signed up is that the investors, I signed up like 2 or 3 days before the event, when the tickets had been sold out for ages. The investors had all booked their meetings, all of the after party events had sold out, and everyone, even trying to get a response from people was impossible because they were drowning in genuinely thousands of messages, right? So I arrived in Helsinki, and it started dawning on me that I was like, well, this is going to be a challenge to make this trip worthwhile as a founder. Like, yes, there's some good talks, but ultimately in the fundraising stage, I want to go speak to investors. And it's actually really tough, apart from that one person that I was already speaking to go out and speak to other people. And so I kind of had to look at myself and sort of said like, right, I'm not just going to go home and for this to be a wasted trip. Like, I'm going to have to make something work. And so I had to really put myself out my comfort zone. I ended up like sneaking into some like private investor lounge and like Googling all the names of the investors on the wall to see what was their ticket size, what was their, what do they invest in, what stage, what site, what industry, and then just going in and just starting up a conversation and trying to pitch to them. Hanging around like investor events where the investors were all hanging out and just going up to speak to them afterwards and being like, look, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Sneaking into like a deep tech event for investors where they were doing almost like red teaming stuff came into play there. But sneaking into those events and just really like putting myself out my comfort zone was super worthwhile. It made it a very fruitful trip. But now going back, if I had started this journey, it was probably about 9 weeks ago that we started, properly building, and like if I would have been so much more not just proactive, but so much more. I would have dropped the ego and be like, look, let's just go and get stuck in, just go up, pitch people, try and make something happen. That proper like entrepreneurial mindset of just like making it work. It really took that trip to Helsinki for me to be like, okay, actually, when you really just put yourself out there and go for it, you can actually make stuff out of what seems like a really bad scenario. And I'll carry that forward for sure into other events. If I see a customer that like, oh, actually, I think that we'd be really well aligned, just go up and have a chat with them. Just go up and just get over your fears and just go and do it. And I'm a pretty sociable guy, but still going up to like cold pitch people while they're sat having a chat with somebody else was a bit of another level above that.
I know the quote from Alex Hormozi doesn't exactly mean what you're saying now, but I think he says something along the lines of like do so much outreach that it's almost impossible for you to fail, right? And it applies the same to work in that room.
Yeah.
Like, we'll go to events and stuff, and you could literally not know anyone there, and it would be the easy way out for you to maybe hide in the corner or stay at the bar and just speak to one or two people, but actually where you'll get the most results is work in the room, going to speaking to as many people as possible, tell them what you do. And 90% of the time, like they might not have that need for you, or they don't want to work with you, right? But I
was going to say, your world is very much more like that. I've seen a couple of the operators at your place in those sorts of events as well. And like I think there's a lot to be learned from techie people who are, like I wouldn't say I'm a typical techie person in that sense. Like I'm quite a sociable guy, if you want to say that techie people aren't social. Not that I was, but I think that still the whole idea of like working a room is very much not something which people are doing all that often. That's more of like a sales and actually recruitment, as I've learned as well. But I think it's a really interesting skill set, and it's really effective if you get good at it. Like, you can make stuff out of nothing, which is very much what I took away from that trip. So yeah, that would be my my takeaway.
It's very much like the drunk guy that tries it on with as many girls as possible, and he finally gets that one yes at the end.
Yeah, that's it.
Doesn't matter. The rejections don't matter because he's got that one. So.
Exactly that. Exactly. And the other thing is like, I think people are actually a lot more open to it than you think. Like you think that people are going to be like, oh God, like this guy, just get out of my face. Kind of like how when you get like cold called or you get cold like emails, and I'm a bit like, oh God. Whereas like when you're in person and you've got a big smile on your face and you're just genuinely saying like, this is what I'm up to, does this align? Do you want to have a chat? Would this be of interest? People generally, like one guy, I went up and I did a little bit of research on them, but I got a bit of the research wrong. And I went up and I was like, oh, this person came and told me to speak to you, which wasn't true. And then he kind of goes like, oh, well, I don't know why they told you to speak to us because, and then he was like saying, this bit of what you just said is actually completely wrong and we wouldn't invest at your stage. And then he goes, but don't worry, man. He comes up with a massive dap and daps me. He goes, enjoy your time anyway. And I was like, fair enough. Like he's, he didn't, even in that sort of worst case scenario, they still were like, he understood the hustle. Yeah, he saw it for what it was. And, people aren't going to shoot you down for that. So, yeah.
No, it's so much harder to be told to F off in person than it is in person.
Yeah, right? Make the most of that. Make the most of that.
And you can't ghost someone when they're literally right in front of your face.
Yeah, as much as you wish you could. People generally tend to be a bit more polite, at least. And if nothing else, a lot of the time you'll leave with like their contact details or whatever, and then you can pick them up, but not so in their face when they've got a bit more time.
Just to kind of finalize this and wrap it up, where can people follow your journey and maybe learn more about what you're doing at Secure Agentics?
Yeah, so I'm super active on LinkedIn, as you can probably vouch. If anyone, my name is Max Corbridge, that's Corbridge, but I'm sure there'll be links to it when this is released anyway. I've also got a newsletter, which is a weekly update on what's happening in AI security. It's not to do with the business, Secure Agentics. It's just purely following what's happening around the industry. And genuinely, if you're wondering how to stay on top of what's happening, I would say that's a pretty good place to go and look, because I'm plugged into everything at the moment, and then I'll follow the biggest events. So everything that you've seen recently that I've talked about pretty much on this episode has been on there. So those are probably the two main ways. If you want to get in contact with me directly, the newsletter is at maxcorbridge.substack.com. And then if you want to get in touch with me directly, my email is max.corbridge .corbridge, which is CORBridge, at Secure Agentics, all one word, .ai.
Cool. I'll wrap up the episode there. Max, I appreciate your time and thanks
Cheers,
for joining
guys.
me.